Well, today I'm with Bryan Haynes, my friend from Gillionville Baptist Church. Bryan, so good to have you with us today. Say hello.
Thank you, Cory. It is great to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
Well, last month, if you haven't read the article, I want to encourage you to go back and read it on Worldview. You can go to GradeLink to be able to see that. But last month, we introduced the importance of a worldview and how we're influenced at an early age towards the development of a worldview and how we see the world and how we're going to relate to it. And of course, that starts in that laboratory for life called home, but it quickly moves out from there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Worldview is primarily relational. It begins at the breakfast table with mom and dad, but immediately beyond that, we have art and we have media. As one Christian apologist put it, artists are our modern-day philosophers. They're the modern-day transmitters of worldview. So when we're engaging a movie, reading a book, listening to music, we're engaging worldview, an artist's particular worldview. And when we consider art and media and we think about it specifically with regard to social media, you are talking about an influencer that really becomes exponential in the life of our young people, especially Gen Z.
Wow. Yeah, whenever you think about the influence of the culture, sometimes we could say, well, my worldview is only being shaped by the outer areas, the things that come on to me, that periphery that comes out. And yet at the same time, don't we have some ownership ourselves?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the mistakes that we might make in the church is we talk about culture as if it's out there, that it's something that is strictly external. But as John Stonestreet emphasizes, we are the culture. The individual shapes the group shapes the individual. There's that cyclical relationship.
Yeah, that push-pull, right?
Yeah. And when we talk about social media, while it feels external, we carry social media in our pocket, and it is growing to be the most powerful influencer with our children. As Brady Shearer puts it, we are living in the greatest shift in communication in 500 years. So what is taking place right now with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, this is Heidelberg Press significance, right? This is the biggest thing that's taken place since the Reformation. And our children are being born into that reality. And they yawn at it. It's common for them. The fact that they can type with their thumbs and communicate an idea, press send or post, and that idea is around the world in a matter of seconds, is commonplace for them.
Yeah.
But historically, this is the biggest thing to happen. Social media has such a tremendous power, as we're discussing now, in its scale. It's global. You have half of the world's population currently online. And so we've got this global platform that has this massive diversity, has tremendous ease of access and usage. And you have this social media platform that also directs and it incentivizes a congruence of thought. And it does that on the front end and on the back end. It does it up front in the algorithm.
Right.
Which determines what you're even seeing on your particular social media feed. And then it incentivizes on the back end, or we'll say the user end, in how you are corresponding with those posts. So when we talk about likes and we talk about shares and saves and those dopamine responses that are a part of all of that, social media is engineered to bring together a collective thinking, a collective worldview of a people.
Yeah.
And this is what our children are being born into.
And, with that, I think about, even like you said, the likes and the dopamine aspect. And it's like, man, it's so important to know who you are, or maybe to understand whose you are, because we belong to Christ, and
That's
understanding my identity in Him, so that my identity is not being tied with, and formed by these social media posts, whether I'm being liked or disliked. Oh, so crucial.
It is crucial, and it's very difficult for our young people who are already navigating what is such a difficult season, especially as they're pushing into adolescence, as they're moving through teenage years, and they're forming that identity. Mm-hmm. Social media makes it all the more complex, makes it all the more difficult. If you talk to teenagers, there's the possibility that they talk about their real life experience or their real life identity and then their virtual life identity. So
just another area of compartmentalization that we do in our Western society so easily. My home life, my work life, my church life, and just separating.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, when you think about school life, because we are a school, and you're thinking about academia, we're thinking about how many hours a student may spend at school, particularly if you play sports or you're in after school curricular activities with dramas or whatever else. Talk about that kind of influence as a whole in our society.
The influence of the classroom is absolutely massive. Reading behind Vodi Bakum years ago, he published a volume, Family-Driven Faith, and there inside he illustrated the fact that when you take a child who is in school from kindergarten to 12th grade, the volume of instructional contact time from kindergarten to 12th grade is over 14,000 hours.
Wow.
14,000 hours. And as we know, the classroom also is a massive transmitter of worldview and philosophy. And we even see this in modern history. To go back to Germany and Italy, you think about Mussolini and you think about their understanding and their harnessing of the classroom and how that mechanism can be used to influence and to shape the worldview of the children who are growing up through it.
Yes. And, of course, we know that some of the aspects in our community, they have agendas, and the whole idea is to get it in the classroom, because if we're going to shape the world of tomorrow, we have to get in the classroom today.
Right. Yeah. So if you think about these two platforms, you think about the classroom, the academia, and you think about social media. If you have 14,000 hours with the classroom development of a child, and then you couple that with perhaps 3 to 6 hours a day of screen time, which is the average for a young person in America now, you have young people who are graduating with at least a graduate degree in whatever philosophy is being transmitted, whatever worldview they're receiving through both of those platforms. Yeah. So if the worldview, for instance, is secular, if it's humanistic, if it's naturalistic, should we be surprised that we're graduating young people who are secular and humanistic and naturalistic?
Yeah. And, of course, we know that that's what's filling most of our colleges and universities these days is a secular humanistic viewpoint. And so what gets crushed quite often is a Christian worldview. And so being strong in that Christian worldview is imperative, particularly whenever you move into these other arenas, whether it's a workplace, a college, whatever, particularly from a secular university. But just like you're talking about, though, the hours, if you're talking over 14,000 hours, and then you're talking about the 3 to 6 hours of screen time a day, which probably is multiplied on the weekends, I imagine.
Right.
Because, at least some homework time or whatever may cull some of that. But you could be talking in the neighborhood of 30,000 hours of influence.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe PhD level.
Yeah. Amazing. Scary all at the same time. I know that we we have to take ownership of what we're watching,
Right.
what we're giving our time to. That song, I can't remember the name of it right now, but, little eyes, be careful what you see, and those kind of things. Oh, that's so crucial for our young people. And even though lots of times as parents, we're not wanting to police every time, every moment or whatever for our young people, but helping them to navigate, to make good decisions. One of the things that a book, I believe it was by Dennis Peacock, he talks about Centerpoint Christianity. And either we're pressed into how I best glorify God, or either we're trying to live on the edge and see what we can
Right.
get away with, kind of that 1 foot in and that 1 foot out mentality.
Right.
And that's not what we're called to. And so that worldview, continuing to press into who God's called us to be and understanding the world as he has designed it, is imperative. So, yeah. What about, we think about Christian education, and that we're talking about here, the contact hours, the influence that even comes through the worldview that's promoted within classrooms and through the material. So having a Christian school, having Christian materials is imperative for us to be able to understand God's definition for life and what life is all about. But one of the things that we do in classical Christian education is we focus on these attributes of truth, goodness, and beauty.
Right.
You want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, so we're talking about what's referred to as transcendentals, but they're things that are essential to life. These are typically the three things that we strive for in our existence. We want to know what is true.
Yes.
We want to know what's real. Mm-hmm. We want to know what is genuinely good. We seek to be virtuous, mm-hmm. and we want what is truly beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy, while social media, for instance, will champion these ideas, and like us, will chase after these ideas. Oftentimes, they're the wrong ideas, because, for instance, what you see on social media that might be portrayed as beautiful, it's not actually real. Mm. Or what is portrayed as being good is actually not true.
Oh, yeah.
So the complexity of discernment that is required, especially for our young people who are navigating the free marketplace of ideas, mm-hmm. who are navigating this tremendous piece of technology that's full of emotion. It's full of narrative. It's got light and color and bells and whistles. As they're navigating these things, there's so much thought that has to go into how do we discern these essentials? Mm-hmm. How do we discern truth? How do we discern what is good? Yeah. And how do we know what is really beautiful? Mm. So I'm grateful for a Christian classical program that speaks directly to these things, specifically to those things, and allows our young people to hold up the lens, God's lens, and see these three things through his perspective.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, too, in thinking about classical education, using the trivium structure, really as you're forming your worldview, we kind of see this being walked out because there's that grammar phase of the worldview, whether it's what we're learning through our home life and experience as we're progressing through from a toddler on up. And then we begin to move in this logical era where we're trying to figure things out. We're trying to kind of spread our own wings and figure out what we believe and maybe even why we believe it, but really moving into that rhetoric level with that art of persuasion where we know what we believe and we can defend it and we can promote it. And so, classical Christian education, I believe, is the best source of Christian education in order to understand how a worldview develops, as well as helping a young person to develop that worldview from a biblical standpoint so that it works in conjunction with hopefully what's being taught at home and then will be lived out far after the child has moved to a place where he or she is on her own and throughout the rest of life.
Absolutely. And I think equally as strong to your point is the timing of when those things are happening. You know, oftentimes we speak to regretfully the dropout rate of young Christian men and women when they go off to school and they go off into the military. Depending on who you read, it may be as low as 72%, it may be as high as 83% of our young people will drop out of church in those years. And what we understand, though, is that the decisions are actually being made far in advance of that particular milestone in their life. That it's really in middle school or at the front of high school where there's this second moment of autonomy that's setting in, where they're asking, as Del Tackett puts it, is what I believe really real? And so to have this opportunity as educators and as pastors to engage our young people when they're coming to that moment in their life, when they're really beginning, as you're saying, and that logic and rhetoric level, when they're really beginning to examine more deeply, more critically, the worldview that has already begun to shape inside of them, to be able to come along them in that particular moment and to speak into that moment and to dialogue with them through that moment. It's the best.
Yes.
It's the greatest privilege we have.
That's one of the things whenever you ask a teacher, by and large, you know, what is it that you like most about teaching? It certainly isn't the grading. It isn't all the planning and the prep. It's like when the light comes on.
Right.
And it really registers deep within the knower of the student where life transformation, where impact can really happen. I love that.
Absolutely.
And I find great joy and great satisfaction in knowing that that's a part of the call that we've been called to as educators. Bryan, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been a wonderful time to talk about the importance of a biblical worldview. I hope that if you have not had the opportunity to go back and read the article, I think it will set the stage for what we're talking about. But until we talk again, be blessed and know that God loves you.
Amen. Thank you, Cory.
Thanks, Bryan.